This is the start of podcast 2 for chapter 14. In it, we're going to talk about several examples of systematic observation tools in physical education. The first one is anecdotal records, which is very similar to intuitive observation, as we talked about in the last slide. But intuitive observation is when you're not looking for anything specific and you get an overall look at things. Again, you can get invalid or unreliable conclusions, and it's useful as a first assessment to look at problem areas. Anecdotal records is doing the same thing, but actually writing everything down. You're making a written record of everything. It's lots of data, though, to analyze, and it can be very subjective. Some examples in our folder on Blackboard for systematic observation tools, some examples of anecdotal records are the classroom management systematic observation. It's an anecdotal record. The framework for teaching, and the Winthrop teaching observation instrument. All of those are anecdotal records. The second type of systematic observation tool is event recording. It determines the occurrence or the lack of occurrence of teaching behaviors, and what we get is a frequency count, or we count the numbers of times that an event or type of behavior occurs. Many different types of event recording tools are available to teachers, and particularly in physical education. It's used when you want to see the frequency of behavior and why and when that frequency is important. The strength of event recording is it's very valid, reliable, and systematic. It answers the question, how much do I do this particular behavior? How much do I call on boys more than I do girls, or vice versa? How many times do I call on certain types of students at the front of the class or at the back of the class? Those are the things we're looking for event recording. One example, particular example in our folder is the gender interactions observation tool that does look at how many times you call on or interact with boys versus girls. Duration recording or time sampling is a very popular one in physical education. Duration recording means that we look at the information on the use of time in teaching. Observers keep track of an event starting and stopping, and there's a timeline if the sequence of the actual behavior matters. Behaviors have to be defined before you do the duration recording. Time sampling means that you observe or record at a designated time interval. In other words, after every 30 seconds you write down what you're observing, or every minute you write down what you're observing. The events are distributed throughout the lesson. An example of this type of systematic tool is called a duration recording sheet, and we have that in the folder in Blackboard. It actually records how many students are active and what they're doing at a different sample of time. Rating scales can be used to divide teaching into qualitative or quantitative levels. It's the most common type of teacher evaluation. They are checklists, they're simple to design, they're very difficult to collect reliable data on because many people don't interpret each one of the items the same way. They are usually abused because they are quantified subjectivity. In other words, you're trying to quantify or make numbers out of things that are subjective. It's useful for evaluating large numbers of teachers, which is why principals use them quite often. It's why we use them here at Winthrop. The scoring rubric is multidimensional rating scale, and that's what people use for this type of teacher observation. An example of this type is the NASPE Physical Education Teacher Observation Tool, which is about 7 pages long, but it's very specific and it tries to make it more valid and reliable, although I'm not sure it does. But that tool can be found in the file on Blackboard. This systematic observation tool is specific to physical education. It's academic learning time in physical education. It looks at student motor activity during physical education class. It's designed to measure the proportion of time in the lesson that students are actually involved in activity. It was considered the single best predictor of teacher effectiveness in physical education for a long time. The average motor activity time in physical education using the ALT-PE all across the United States is about 15 to 25% of the period, which is pretty bad. We're looking at trying to at least have 50% or above of the class being having the students engaged in motor activity or physical activity. It also looks at motor appropriate activity related to learning instead of just plain old physical activity for no purpose. The categories in this tool are called motor appropriate, motor inappropriate, motor supporting, non-motor engaged, interim, waiting, off task, and on task. It's a very complicated type of instrument, but it does get at the meat of the um, teaching in physical education, which is how much are they physically active in learning. Teacher feedback systematic observation is very good to use for those who are worried about their feedback and how much of it, the frequency, and the type of feedback that you're using. It describes 6 dimensions of feedback. The categories are in target is whether you're targeting the class, group, or individual feedback, the type of feedback, evaluative, corrective, specific, and so on, or level of specificity is one category, also general versus specific. Also, the context, is it the skills or is it behavior that you're giving feedback on? And also, is it positive or negative, congruent or incongruent? The systematic observation form that's in the folder on Blackboard is Positive Reinforcement Observation Instrument. We also have a teacher evaluation tool on student conduct. How do teachers develop and maintain appropriate behavior in classes? That's the question that it's answering. How does a teacher structure behavior, and how do they come up with clear expectations for behavior? Soliciting teacher behavior is another category on this. Requesting immediate response, a desist is an example. Appraising teacher behavior, in other words, how they make judgments about student contact. Preventive and corrective behavior versus positive and negative behavior, and how they deal with student conduct in class. There are 2 observation tools in the folder about that. They're in red down at the bottom of this slide. Student conduct, teacher response. That's the type of evaluation tool. And the other one is Behavior Management Observation Instrument. This is the last slide, or the end, of Podcast 2 for Chapter 14.